Hello and welcome to the introductory lecture for Accounting 203 for this spring quarter coming up. So my name is Tim Madeley. I'm looking forward to teaching this class. This is actually my favorite class to teach. So when SPSEC approached me about helping them out with one of these classes, I was happy to do so. In this short lecture, I'll talk a little bit about my background, just so you know where I'm coming from, what my strategy is for teaching online classes, how I go about doing that. I'll talk a little bit about the syllabus and the keys to being successful and kind of how the class is going to work. So a little bit about my background first. I used to work for this company, Big Toys, a playground manufacturer. They were originally in Tacoma and then moved to Olympia, or Tumwater. And I worked for them while I was in school. So when I was in high school, I worked for them, and then I went to Tacoma Community College for my first 90 credits and then transferred to UW up in Seattle and got my bachelor's degree in business with a concentration in accounting. Then I took and passed the CPA exam, and I went from working in production to working in the office and being the controller at Big Toys. So helping them with all their accounting work, all the financial statements, pricing, budgeting, all of those kinds of things when I was fairly young. The company was acquired by a large publicly traded Danish company in the early 90s, and then my job shifted a bit where I was in charge of all of the financial matters for all of the companies they owned in North America. So my job got more complicated, which was good. I learned a lot. And then in 2003, they decided that they did not want to, the Danish company decided they did not want to own this US company anymore. And so they tried to sell Big Toys, the product line. I took a leap, borrowed a lot of money, and bought the company. My wife and I did at the end of 2003. So at the beginning of 2004, we started Big Toys as an independent company that my wife and I owned. We knew that for years and years, 30 years really, the company had made wooden playground equipment like you see here. And we understood that that was a declining portion of the market because of fears of vandalism and whatnot. So the first thing we did was set about offering an alternative choice to customers. So we rebranded the company as being an environmental company or a green company, which appealed to a lot of our customer base. And we, over the first year of our ownership, developed an alternate material choice. So customers could either purchase the wood product, which was a sustainable resource, or they could purchase a recycled version of the product, which was recycled steel, mostly from crushed cars, and then all of the dimensional lumber on the gray product you see was recycled milk jugs. The thing from a cost accounting perspective, and I did my own cost accounting even though I was the owner, was coming up with pricing for the new version of the product before we had ever made one. And we had to quote projects and trying to get orders in the pipeline and all of that before we ever started making it actually in a production sense. And so coming up with all of the material costs for that, including scrap rates, all of the labor costs for the work that employees do on that, and then all of the overhead related costs for producing that alternate version of the product was fairly complicated. The other thing we did was we launched a new version of the Seesaw, which we patented, and that was a very successful product for us. And again, I had to come up with what our pricing should be for this product that had never existed before, and we hadn't made one. So I had to get into the fine details about every washer, every rivet, every spring, every plastic housing, what all of those costs were, again, for the materials, for the labor, and for the factory overhead that was required to make that product. So I kind of like geeking out about that kind of stuff and doing it very precisely. Again, the importance of it is if I did a sloppy job, if I did it wrong, forgot some cost, all of that, and set the price too low, we could be in a position where we were selling a product below what it cost us to make, which would have been devastating for the company. So I had a really good time doing all of this. I learned a lot. I owned the company for 7 years. Over that period of time, we doubled the sales and were very successful. And then the recession hit in 2009, and the bulk of our customers were municipal customers, cities and counties, and their budgets were slashed, and a lot of the orders customers had placed with us were canceled. And so I reluctantly agreed to sell the company to a large competitor. I worked for them for a year and found it difficult to go from being an owner to being an employee. So I elected to leave at the end of that year. I went back to school, got my MBA, did some consulting work for other companies, and then in 2012 started teaching part-time. In 2015 I started teaching full-time. So I've taught mostly accounting classes, some business classes as well, at South Puget Sound Community College. I did that for several years. I've taught at University of Washington, their Tacoma campus, for their Masters of Accounting program. And now my full-time job is at St. Martin's University, where I teach accounting courses to undergraduates and to graduate students as well. So my approach to teaching online is to try to make the class as close to a face-to-face class as possible, to kind of make it a substitute for that, but with more flexibility on your part. So for that reason, all of my lectures, I will upload the PowerPoint for the lecture. I don't use publisher lectures, I use my own. And so I'll upload the PowerPoint, and then I'll record voiceovers like I do here. I won't include my face in the video for normal lectures. Bad enough you have to listen to me, you shouldn't have to look at me too. But in any event, my recommendation is to print the PowerPoint. Read the chapter first, print the PowerPoint, watch the lecture. I try to keep all of my lectures between 15 and 20 minutes, so they're pretty, easy to get through, and take notes as I'm lecturing. And you can pause and all of that. I run them through YouTube, so they're closed captioned, so I can't vouch for the quality of the closed captioning, but at least you can read along as you see as you listen to what I'm saying. In terms of homework, I'll also upload practice videos through YouTube where I work a problem or two manually that might be a little bit tricky for you for the upcoming homework assignment, so that'll kind of give you a little bit of extra coaching on that. Here's my contact information, my email address. That's the best way to reach me. I normally don't give out my cell phone, but I don't have an office at SPSEC at this time, so I don't have an office phone. I couldn't get to it anyways. So that is my cell phone. You're welcome to call me on that anytime. When I go to bed at night, I turn it off and put it in another room, so you won't be waking me up if you call late. If you don't reach me, please leave a voicemail with your name and a number I can reach you back at, and I'm happy to do that. I'm a big believer that sometimes a 5-minute conversation on the phone can take the place of 15 emails that go back and forth. So sometimes it's simpler just to talk about something, and I welcome your calls in that regard. If necessary, I can also schedule Zoom meetings if that's beneficial. So there's a course calendar that is up on Canvas, and I would recommend printing that out and putting it up, where you can see it all the time, because that's going to dictate how we march through the material in the class. You notice I've done it on a 4-day schedule, which replicates what we would be doing if we were meeting face-to-face. And so anyways, that's pretty self-explanatory. I'll talk about the homework and the exams in a minute here. So the homework is due each day at the end of the day that's shown on the course calendar. So as an example, on a Wednesday, I believe it is, the first homework assignment is due. So you need to have that done, and which is done on Cengage, on our course's Cengage class. So you need to have that done by the end of the day that day. And Cengage will automatically grade it and tell you how you've done and that sort of thing. If you need any extensions, so I know that it's kind of a tumultuous time, and people have a lot of demands on themselves with having kids home and all of that sort of thing. So I get it that kind of more leniency is required under the current conditions. So if that's the case, I just ask you to email me in advance. Don't go 2 weeks without doing anything and then ask me for an extension. So manage your time well enough that you say, well, I've got something coming up. I'm not going to be able to work on my class the next couple of days. So send me an email and I'll move your deadlines out on those things. So I'm not worried about that, but I just want you to do it in advance. I'll also post additional logarithmic problems for practice in Cengage. So that's a good way to study before an exam. So they're identical versions of the problems we did for homework, but the numbers are different, the names are different. So it's just a way of having extra practice. No points associated with that, but just extra practice if you would benefit from that. The exams, we'll have a lot of exams. There's an exam for every chapter. And the reason for that is that I think it's a bit less stressful when you're tested over a more narrow range of material rather than, a midterm and a final, that sort of thing. So the exams are also on Cengage and must be completed by the end of the day. And like with homework, you need to ask in advance if you want an extension, not after you don't do it. I will post exam reviews before each exam, which I'd recommend printing out, taking like it would be an exam, like we were in class together. And then that day, I'll also open up the solution to that exam review so you can print that out and grade yourself and shoot me questions if you have any questions about anything before you take your exam. So past students have told me that that was really helpful for them. So the keys to being successful, one is to complete all the homework. I could actually graph the percentage of homework that a student completes and their grade, and it almost perfectly correlates to the students that get better grades are the students that do all of their homework. So I've chosen each exercise and problem specifically to build your skills up to the exam. So doing that will help you do better. Like I mentioned earlier, I would recommend reading the chapter, then listening to the lecture and taking notes. And again, there may be a couple of lectures if I'm, to keep them under 15 to 20 minutes. So there may be multiple lectures, 2, potentially 3 for a chapter. Here's the key thing: ask for help, especially in an online class. In a face-to-face class, I can see when I'm talking that somebody doesn't get what I'm saying, and I can back up and explain it a different way. That's really impossible to do online. So I have to rely on you to ask me questions if that's the case. And I've given you a variety of ways to reach me. So please take advantage of that. Okay. And then the other thing I would say about all online classes is that it's really important to be very disciplined and stay organized. I think in this strange time, it's also good for your mental health as well to have structure and have a certain time each day that you set aside to work on this course. That's why I've given you a course calendar so you can print that out, post it near where you do your work, and check things off as you do them. But it's important to do that. I would recommend having a 3-ring binder and keeping everything that you print off in that 3-ring binder so that you can find it later. The last thing I want to talk about briefly is what this class is all about. So we're going to talk a bit in this class in the beginning about cost accounting. So in your Accounting 201 and 202 courses, the focus was on financial accounting. So the accounting that pertains to how we communicate about the financial health and performance of a company to outsiders, to creditors, investors, government entities, those kinds of users of financial statements. So that's Accounting 201 and 202, very rules-based, of course, focused on generally accepted accounting principles or GAAP, and learning how we produce financial statements that comply with that. Cost accounting is done to determine the cost of all the objects or services that a company makes. So that's needed in part for financial accounting, because you need to know what the cost of an object is to come up with cost of goods sold on the income statement, or the value of inventory on the balance sheet. So cost accounting is required for that. And we'll talk for multiple chapters about cost accounting. Then the latter portion of the class, we'll get into managerial accounting. And if financial accounting deals with information for outsiders, managerial accounting deals with information for insiders. So managers in the company, presidents of the company, people that are in charge of making decisions for the company, what information can we provide to them so that they can make good decisions to help the company be more successful? So budgets, should we buy a new machine and retire this old machine? Should we accept an order at a lower price? All of those kinds of questions. We'll get into that near the end of the course, and that's a fascinating area. So that's the end of my lecture for the introduction to the course. So I'm looking forward to this quarter with all of you. Hope to hear from all of you. Please note the first assignment due on Tuesday is very easy. It's just a quiz on Canvas to tell me a little bit about yourself, and that'll help me kind of fine tune the class if I know what your interests are. So thank you very much. I look forward to hearing from all of you, and I look forward to a good quarter. Thanks.